But let me come to the big question, which was also raised in the first discussion, that why are those who have been vaccinated with Covishield not welcome in the European Union as per the new rules which have been announced and will come into effect from the 1st of July. So this is essentially what's happening. The European Union has decided to issue something called a green pass. It's sort of a vaccine passport which will allow those who have been vaccinated or who have tested negative for COVID-19 to move freely within the European Union. There are 4 vaccines on this list and Covishield does not make the cut. Now, obviously, if there are just 4 vaccines on the list, that means a lot of vaccines from around the world, the Sputnik or the Chinese vaccine, a lot of them don't make the cut. Covaxin, of course, is not in the picture. But the reason why there has been furore and some consternation over Covishield not making the cut is because it's twin, the same vaccine made by AstraZeneca but sold with the brand name of Vaxzevria, that's the new name for the AstraZeneca vaccine, is on the list. That's been allowed, but Covishield hasn't. So Adar Poonawalla, the CEO of Serum Institute of India, tweeted out today saying that I know about this concern, I'm going to take it up at the highest levels, we'll take it up diplomatically, etc. We've also learned that Serum has in fact applied to the EMA. We don't know when, whether it's after all of this mess or there was a pending application. There are some reports quoting the European Medical Agency saying they haven't received any application till now. So is it just a matter of not following the right principles, or are there bigger questions here of vaccine discrimination? Because it's not just about Covishield. It's about vaccines being used in several nations of the world, and people who have access to those vaccines will be left out from entry to certain countries. To speak more on this, I'm joined this evening by Meera Shankar, former ambassador to the United States, Murali Neelakantan, principal lawyer at Amicus, and Dr. Tanmay Mahapatra, epidemiologist. Dr. Mahapatra, let me begin with your take. Would it be fair to say that both the vaccines, the one that AstraZeneca makes and sells in the rest of the world, and Covishield are the same? So on that basis, on the basis of merit, if one has permissions, the other should too?
If both are from the same principle and same formula, so there should not be any disparity in terms of its approval, because ultimately we are dealing with the vaccine efficacy and we are dealing with a disease which is actually spreading faster than our thoughts and politics. So we actually need to ensure that we understand these kind of issues often happen because of different kind of procedural aspects and other stuff that needs to be solved in war footing. And definitely, if one of the vaccines is actually approved, and for the other one should also get equal validity and approval.
Yeah, okay. Murali, how do you look at it? And you know, the broader principle over here. So there are 2 sides to this debate that has been raging today. One is that why not give Covishield approval if, its twin has approval, the Vaxzevria has approval as well. The other side is, well, hey, maybe Serum Institute of India just didn't follow the process and apply in time. How do you look at these developments?
We should have thought of all this a long time ago. When AstraZeneca got its approval, the approval states very clearly all the manufacturing sites that are approved for this vaccine. There are sites outside the EU that have been approved. So, for example, there is a Chinese site, there is a South Korean site, there is even an American site. At that time, it should have been possible, and somebody there dropped the ball, to have added Serum Institute's facilities to that application so that when the vaccine was approved, it would have included these manufacturing sites. Now, perhaps at that time, they didn't think that we would have this issue with vaccination certificates or the green pass. Having said that, by January, we knew that this process was coming into effect. So the EU put out consultation to talk about potentially having vaccine certificates. By March, we had a discussion paper. The IT system was built to be in place. So all of this had commenced 6 months ago. Then we should have made the application between the ministry in India and Serum Institute and AstraZeneca. This identification could have been done that here is an issue for Indians to be traveling, for others around the world who will get Covishield to be traveling to the EU. The agreement is done on a reciprocal basis. So all of these discussions should have started in January and not 1 week before the Green Pass comes into effect. All of this is discussions between politicians and diplomats. IT systems have to be built in place. For India, the issue simply is, can we have an IT system in place that provides a credible basis for vaccination or for tests that works with the IT system that has been set up for all of the EU, so that when we enter the European Union, the digital certificate that you have in India is credible and can be used there. So we should have thought of this last year. Okay, we didn't. We should have thought of this in January. We didn't. And therefore, we find ourselves in this sad position in June.
So, Murali, just a follow-up there. You think this is simply someone not ticking all the boxes, not dotting the I's and crossing the T's and goofing up on paperwork that has led us to the situation? Because remember, it's not just Covishield which has found itself off the list. Like I said in my opening comments, you have the Chinese vaccine not on the list, Sputnik is not on the list. There are several vaccine candidates around the world which are being rolled out right now in their countries. They have not found themselves on the list. It's limited to 4 vaccines which are available largely in the developed world.
And approved in the EMA. So it's not so much racism as the European Medicines Agency is saying that we have approved these 4 and therefore we can talk to these 4. We can talk about what these 4 do, what is the level of protection they offer. We know all of this. We don't know for the others. There is some hope that this list might get a little longer because the EU is in discussion with the WHO. So it is possible that those vaccines which are in the EOL by the WHO will also be included in this list. So we might get over that hurdle hopefully soon, but that still leaves us the digital challenge that you may have vaccination, but do you have a certification process which is credible that will be acceptable in the EU, or will they insist that when you get there, you have to quarantine yourself? So it's not as if you're going to be excluded from the EU. What they may ask you to do is get a test when you arrive and quarantine for a period of time and test again. If both are negative, then you will be allowed inside. So I see that as the 2 challenges. One, getting the WHO list approved for the EU and getting the IT systems in place that work.
You know, I want to take a broader view of this, and Ambassador Shankar, I want to come to you with that, because here we're talking about the European Union and its rules. That's the instant trigger for this conversation. They come into effect from 1st of July. But then the US has its own rules, Canada has its own rules, and you have a different set in different parts of the world. As infections recede, more and more humans get vaccinated and travel begins. Is this a very real concern of exclusive clubs that are going to be formed around just certain vaccines, which are not available to everyone, whose technology, in the case of the mRNA ones, cannot be replicated and is not being freely shared?
Well, if you take a look at the world figures, around 23% of the world population has received at least one vaccine. If you look at how many in developing countries have received the vaccine, it's 0.9%. So the bulk of this 23% consists of people who have been vaccinated in the US, UK, Europe, maybe some in China, some in Russia, and now India, Mexico. Some of these countries have also started getting vaccinated, but the percentages are far less. Clearly, I think there is need to adopt a policy of global supply very quickly, because this is one pandemic which is not going to disappear if you do not actually control it at a global level, because it doesn't respect international boundaries, country boundaries. So now you do have some effort we are seeing from the US and Europe to donate vaccines, but whether the quantum will be up to the levels that are required, I don't think so. I think the US has promised 80 million, 60 million AstraZeneca, which it has in store, which it is not using in the US. And it says that it will distribute these as soon as the FDA clears them for use, and another 20 million. The European Union has said this will be by the end of June, July, I think they hope to distribute these. The European Union says it will provide 100 million vaccines by the end of the year. So you're looking at 180 million. The WHO has the COVAX program, and the Serum Institute was supposed to be one of the major suppliers to that program, but that has got delayed and derailed in terms of the huge requirements which have emerged in India itself, and therefore the prohibition on exports.
Sure.
But clearly, when you're looking at the European Union's measures, I would say that we need to, whatever has not happened or didn't happen in time, I think we now need to really apply and fulfill all the protocols required to get clearances.
No, but my question is my question is not on the paperwork. If I may rephrase and ask you a very pointed question, do we need to take this up diplomatically? Do we need to be concerned that Indian citizens right now between Covishield and Covaxin are going to be left out in all of European Union?
Partly it's a question of also getting your own pandemic under control. Travel from India was open, for instance, to the UK or to the US till we had the second wave, the ferocity of which I think we can't discount, and the anxiety that it generated across the world about the new mutations. I mean, look at the UK. All the cases that they have got are really from the Delta variant, which mutated in India. Now, the same can happen from other countries. So I'm sure that as we get our pandemic under control, things will become much easier. But in the meanwhile, we need to follow. But
they're two different things. They're two different things. Infection rates are... Yes, ma'am, but infection rates is a different thing, and efficacy and acceptability of vaccines available in the country is a different thing. They're not necessarily related. This is about people who've had 2 doses of vaccines, whether they will be welcome everywhere or not.
Tamanna, I'm sorry. I think the Indian government, for instance, was at fault in not putting travel bans on the UK. When the UK variant was, galloping within the UK, we put the ban very late. The net result is that we got the UK variant in India, and then, there's been mutations and other mutations. So I think every country looks out for itself, and at some level wants to, their primary duty is to ensure the safety and security of their citizens. Then they look at, international norms and things like that.
Okay.
So let us also look at how we have handled the second wave, how ferocious it has been, and the fact that it is still, you've got so many districts which are still districts of concern as far as this is concerned, and new mutations of Delta Plus. So, and also some question marks about efficacy of the vaccines and the credibility of your vaccine certification. You've had these cases in Calcutta where there were fake vaccines.
Now we're coming to an important point, and let me get Dr. Tanmay into this. Credibility of vaccine certification. So I still maintain infection rates and Delta plus and Delta variant and stopping people coming in from countries where high infection rates is one issue. The other issue is that will people vaccinated with a certain jab be allowed and will others not be allowed? For example, China at some point said we'll allow only those who are vaccinated with our homegrown vaccine. You know, it's a form of vaccine nationalism. So do you think there is any case to question the credibility of the vaccine certificates that we're putting out?
Frankly speaking, as an epidemiologist, I really don't understand these kind of issues being raised in a situation when we really don't know when third wave is going to rip us apart. And this is very important that we need to understand all the United Nations, WHO and all other organizations need to work together to have a common uniform policy regarding this, so that these kind of nationalist questions like we will only allow our homegrown vaccines, etc., these are pretty nonsense, because this particular pandemic, when we are listening to a disease which has actually impacted more than 200 countries, and in each of the countries we had these different reeling situations. It's really ridiculous to have these kind of statements and all of the stuff that we will have questions regarding vaccine being generated or delivered or being prepared and managed in different countries as opposed to others. It's important for those countries to come forward and set up a system, help other countries to set up a system, because by no means you can actually stop a variant from one country to go and mutate in another and then come back to the same country. It's already proven that this Delta variant, how it has actually replaced the earlier one across the world, and how its spread ultimately ended up in majority of the countries where we had seen this second wave starting very fast, ultimately got into a complete mess. So this is very important that all these kind of aspects are put together, and organizations like the WHO need to come in front and set up a system so that all the countries, especially the developed countries, need to have a particular uniform policy across the globe to have different certifications put into the similar uniformity, so that this kind of particular claim cannot suddenly come up and create ripples and all those stuff. I find all the vaccine hesitancy and everything, these are actually
close. Yeah, Murali, closing comments on what kind of a world order we're going to see going forward. Will people be able to travel depending on their access, and here the key word is access, to a certain kind of vaccine?
This issue has been addressed in the EU. As a matter of right, EU citizens have free movement guaranteed to them. And the EU understands that some people may not get the vaccine, may not take the vaccine. Vaccine may not be recommended for them because they have comorbidities and other issues. And what they are trying to say is, we recognize that there will be a class of people who will not be vaccinated. In the interest of public health, we will allow them to travel with certain restrictions. So they may be asked to take tests, they may be asked to quarantine. So those are the requirements that will be imposed on those who are not vaccinated.
Yes.
So there will be only a certain level of restriction for public health for these kind of people. So I suspect that yes, there will be a kind of racism, those who are vaccinated and those who are not. Those who are vaccinated will have a lot more freedom than those who are not. And those who are not vaccinated will have to undergo tests and quarantine. That seems to be the way it is progressing. We anticipated this last year.
Let's call it discrimination. You know, and we're seeing it. It's going to be discrimination going forward, and we have to guard against it. Even within India, where if you have a situation where those who had access to vaccines can move about or go to places more easily than those who don't, it might not necessarily be fair because everyone's not had an equal chance yet, and that's the key takeaway. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us on the second debate this evening. We'll take a very short break, but we're back with a very exciting interview for you on the other side.